Sometimes, everything slows down in a very natural way. No clear reason. Just a moment when you realize you are standing still and listening more than usual. Taurus often carries that kind of presence. They do not enter other people's lives with noise, and they do not try to be noticed. They show up in their own way, steady, quiet, and somehow that alone can make others feel at ease, even if no one says it out loud. After watching long enough, one thing becomes clear. Some kinds of strength are not about moving faster than everyone else, but about staying with what you choose, even as everything around you keeps changing. Taurus feels like that. Not showing off, not trying to prove anything, yet rarely giving up without a real reason. Listen to this story as a small slice of everyday life. Not something you need to believe, not something you have to agree with. Just a quiet invitation to wonder whether, in those familiar moments of stillness, you might recognize a small part of yourself. There is no need to answer right away. Some questions are meant to rest quietly, like a small flame burning slowly inside, warm enough to offer light, without needing to flare up. Over time, I have met many people who carry the energy of Taurus, and at first, almost no one notices them. They are not the fastest person on the road, and not the loudest voice in the room. Yet somehow, when things begin to feel tangled or uncertain, other people's eyes drift toward them without thinking. As if there is something solid there, a place that does not shift. Taurus often feels like that. No need to assert anything. No need to explain. They are present through a steadiness that time itself slowly confirms. I remember sitting once in a small cafe, the yellow light soft, not too bright, just enough to see steam rising from a cup of coffee. The person across from me was a classic Taurus. The conversation had no dramatic moments, just ordinary pieces of life. But the longer I listened, the more I sensed something deep beneath the surface. Not ambition, not promises, just the quiet feeling of someone who knows where they stand and does not rush to leave before they are truly ready. Taurus tends to stay close to familiar things. An old road walked every day. A quiet room, work that repeats itself, yet is done with rare focus. From the outside, it can look slow or overly cautious. But not all movement is measured by speed. Some progress is only felt when you look back at the distance already covered. From what I have seen, the inner strength of Taurus does not come from major upheavals. It is gathered in very small moments. Choosing patience instead of walking away. Choosing silence instead of reacting too quickly. Spending an afternoon staying with oneself, even when no one asks. Bit by bit, like packed earth beneath your feet, unseen, yet strong enough to stand on for a long time. There are moments when even Taurus does not realize where their strength truly lies. They watch others move quickly, change direction again and again, and wonder whether they have been standing still for too long. But life has its own way of answering. When everything around begins to tire, when rush choices start to show their gaps, that quiet endurance is still there. This story is not shared to prove anything, not to label, and not to create absolute belief. It is simply one perspective, gathered from long observation, slow conversations, and silences that are hard to name. Taurus in everyday life rarely makes an immediate impression, but is often the one who remains after everything has settled. If you happen to see yourself somewhere in these words, it may be nothing more than coincidence, or it may be a very gentle reminder that not all strength needs to speak. Some forms of inner power are meant to hold, to endure, and to keep moving forward at their own pace. And this story, from here, is only just beginning, not through a big movement, but by letting everything slow down one more beat. Like standing in front of a familiar road, not turning right away, just staying still long enough to hear your inner voice more clearly. Taurus often chooses that moment. A moment without speaking, without explaining, letting emotions quietly return to their proper place. Silence, from what I have witnessed many times, is never empty. It feels like a quiet room with a window left slightly open, light entering very slowly. Inside, thoughts do not compete or rush forward. They appear one by one, then gently step back. Taurus sits there, not to avoid an answer, but to be certain that when they do speak, what comes out has had time to mature. Some things, if said too early, lose their weight. Some emotions, if left alone a little longer, naturally find their own shape. From the outside, that silence can make people uncomfortable. Many are used to fast rhythms, instant responses, the idea that everything should have an immediate answer. Taurus moves differently. They know the feeling of having thought so deeply that adding another word would only dilute what matters. Not because they do not care, but because they care too much to risk harming something with a rushed reaction. I once saw a Taurus stand for a long time in front of a very small decision. No one was pushing. No one was holding them back. They simply stood there, looking at the situation from many angles, like watching a small flame to be sure it was warm enough, not something that would flare up and burn out too quickly. When they choose silence, it is not an empty space between two sentences. It is the time needed to keep that flame burning evenly. Silence is also where Taurus stores the things that are hard to put into words. Old wounds, everyday worries, questions that do not yet have names. They do not carry these around for others to see. They do not place them on the table as proof. They let them rest somewhere inside, like stones slowly smoothed by time. That process creates a very particular kind of weight, an inner strength that does not need to be displayed. When Taurus finally speaks, the words are often few, but they carry weight. Not because they are more correct than anyone else, but because behind them is an entire stretch of road walked in silence. The listener may not notice it right away, but the feeling stays, like the echo of a quiet room after the door is closed. Not loud, yet hard to forget. From the outside, that silence can be misunderstood. But if you stay close long enough, you begin to see it for what it is. A way Taurus protects what they value. No dramatic gestures, no raised voices, just a quiet effort to keep the inner world from being disturbed too soon. And from that stillness, another layer of depth begins to emerge, slowly, yet steady in its own very particular way. And from there, the image of a familiar road begins to come into focus. Not a brighter new road, just a path that is there every day. Familiar enough that you do not need to watch your steps, yet long enough that every step still leaves its own mark. Taurus often chooses roads like this, not because they are afraid to turn in another direction, but because they want to truly understand the ground beneath their feet. There is something deeply human in the way they stay connected to what is familiar. A job that keeps the same name year after year. A relationship held together by steady presence, without too many promises. A daily routine that seems simple on the surface, yet quietly keeps them from drifting as everything else keeps shifting. From the outside, it can look old, too slow, too safe. But if you stay long enough, you begin to notice that each passing day carries a slightly different shade, even if the change is barely visible. Taurus does not move fast, but they move deep, like someone who chooses to dig one well instead of running around searching for many sources of water. At first, there is nothing impressive to see, just steady, repeated motions. The same effort, day after day. But over time, depth begins to matter. The water does not appear right away, yet once it is reached, it stays. That is how they tend to live. Few loud experiments, few sudden changes. Each choice placed down with full weight behind it. There are days when Taurus appears to be standing still in the fast current of the world. People around them change direction, change goals, change roles, and they remain there on the same familiar road. But inside, movements are happening. Thoughts are being sharpened, emotions quietly rearranged, values tested one small piece at a time. Not many people notice, because there are no outward signs to announce it. I once watched a Taurus over a long stretch of time. Everything around them kept changing, while they seemed unchanged, at least on the surface. Then one day, when an important choice appeared, they stepped forward with clarity. No noise, no hesitation, Only then did it become clear that the time which looked like stillness was actually a long journey already taken, just along a different direction. Deeper. Quieter. For Taurus, a familiar road is not mindless repetition. It is more like rereading the same book at different points in life. The words stay the same, but the experience does not. Each return brings new understanding, something set down, something else kept. Because of that, the road does not grow old. It grows dense with experience, with memory, with questions asked and answered in silence. Some people say that change is a sign of progress. That can be true, in many cases. But for Taurus, progress sometimes comes from staying with one choice long enough to see it transform from the inside. Not changing direction, but changing the way the step is taken. Not leaving the old behind, but understanding it more deeply. That is a kind of forward movement that does not need noise. And then, when looking back, it becomes clear that Taurus has traveled farther than expected. Not through the number of experiences, but through the depth of each one. The familiar road is still there, yet the footprints have changed. Slower, more grounded, carrying an inner strength built from many small steps. From here, the story continues in that same way. Unhurried, yet steady enough to make someone want to walk alongside it a little longer. And when the pace slows like that, you begin to notice that some very quiet spaces have always been there. They simply went unseen before. Rooms without many pictures on the walls. No background noise. Light just soft enough to let you see your own thoughts. Taurus often finds themselves in places like these. Not because they want to withdraw, but because nothing there demands that they become someone else. Inner strength, in many cases, does not come from a single explosive moment. It grows in hours that no one remembers. Sitting still without reaching for a phone. Staying a few extra minutes after everything is already done. A pause without a clear reason. Just the feeling that it is not time to stand up yet. Taurus gathers endurance from moments like these. Little by little, like fine dust settling on objects over the years. You do not notice it right away, but once you touch it, you realize it has been there for a very long time. There is something deeply personal in the way they can tolerate stillness. Not everyone can remain with themselves when there is no sound to cover things up. For Taurus, a quiet room does not create discomfort. Instead, it feels like a place of shelter, where thoughts can be placed on the table, turned over gently, and eventually settle into the right position. No need for immediate decisions. No need for rushed conclusions. Just enough time. In those quiet stretches, emotions are not pushed away or pulled forward. They are allowed to stay whole. Sometimes it is fatigue. Sometimes a very thin strand of hope. Sometimes a hollow feeling that is hard to name. Taurus does not rush to fill that space. They allow it to exist, trusting that it will eventually speak in its own natural way. That patience forms a solid foundation, even when no one is watching. Others sometimes believe strength comes from surviving major upheavals, but for Taurus, strength is built on days when nothing happens. When no one checks in, when no one evaluates, when no one applies pressure. All that remains is breathing, thinking, and being fully present with the moment as it is. Those days are rarely remembered. Yet they are what keeps everything from collapsing when real challenges finally appear. At times, Taurus wonders why they do not react like others do. Why they do not express more. Why they do not share the moment emotions rise. Over time, they begin to see that everyone has a different way of staying balanced. For them, quiet is not an empty space that needs filling. It is the ground they stand on. Because of that, decisions come more slowly, but regret is rare. Those quiet rooms are not always comfortable. Sometimes they reveal things that are not yet easy to face. Still, Taurus rarely runs from them. They stay seated, letting the light be just enough to illuminate the corners. Not too bright to cause harm. Not too dark to lose the way. Within that fragile balance, inner strength gradually takes shape. No label required. No validation needed. And when they step back out of those quiet spaces, Taurus carries something difficult to explain. Not a complete answer, not absolute certainty, just the sense that they stayed long enough to know what should be kept and what can be released. Strength formed in this way is quiet, unseen, yet strong enough to keep moving, strong enough to remain, and strong enough that others, if they pay close attention, can sense a resilience quietly holding its place. And it is right then that people's eyes begin to change. Not because Taurus has done anything especially striking, but because they are still there when many others have already turned in a different direction. That steady presence is sometimes called by the wrong name. People say they are stubborn, hard to move, slow to adapt. But if you stand close enough, long enough, you begin to see that it is not blind attachment. It is something very human. A need to feel solid ground before taking the next step. Taurus holds on to what is familiar not out of fear of loss, but because they understand the value of the ground beneath their feet. Before changing, they want to know where they are standing, and what might be lost if they move too fast. Some people skip entire stages, as if afraid of being left behind. Taurus moves differently. They check each brick, each joint, as if building a house not meant for temporary shelter, but for a long life inside it. That careful approach is easily mistaken for rigidity. Yet for them, it is the only way to avoid tearing down what took real effort to build. In everyday conversations, I have seen Taurus grow quiet when others push for change. They do not argue loudly. They do not nod just to move things along. There is simply a pause, a few seconds longer than expected, long enough to make others uneasy. Inside that pause, many questions are being asked. Is this change truly necessary? Is it coming from desire or from pressure? And if a step is taken, will there still be a way back? Those questions do not demand immediate answers, but they protect Taurus from decisions that later need repair. At times, that steadiness makes them feel alone. When everyone moves forward together, Taurus stays back a little longer. Not to resist, but to be sure the direction is right. The feeling of being left behind is not comfortable, yet they accept it, knowing that following the crowd does not always mean moving correctly. That is where their courage lies. In the willingness to be misunderstood, as long as their inner stability remains intact. For Taurus, being steady does not mean locking every door. It is more like protecting a small flame in the wind, not showing it off, not letting it flare too brightly, just shielding it enough so it does not go out. When change is needed, they begin from the inside. When something must be released, they do so only after exploring every other possibility. Because of this, their shifts are rarely impulsive. Each one carries the weight of long consideration, even if others only see the final result. The sense of safety Taurus seeks is not a closed-off comfort zone. It is the feeling of knowing exactly what they are doing. When the ground is firm, they can travel very far. But when it is uncertain, they would rather stand still than step in the wrong direction. This can test the patience of others, yet it helps Taurus avoid unnecessary collapse. In this way, steadiness becomes a quiet form of protection. And over time, those who once called them stubborn begin to notice something else. That in the hardest moments, Taurus is still there, not changing direction, not walking away. That steadiness is not loud, but it creates a deep sense of trust. Not everyone needs it, but when it is needed, it is there. That is the strength of standing firmly on ground you have chosen, even when it means waiting a little longer before taking the next step. And within that waiting space, another kind of strength slowly reveals itself. It does not seek attention. It does not create noise. It is like a small flame held in the palm of a hand. Not strong enough to warm an entire room, yet warm enough so the one holding it does not grow cold. Taurus often carries this kind of strength. No need to prove it. No urgency to display it. Just staying there, burning evenly, and not going out. The world around them seems accustomed to acceleration. People talk about sudden leaps, about breakthrough moments, about instant turning points. Within that rhythm, Taurus appears to move one beat slower. But if you look closely, they are not standing still. They simply choose to keep a steady pace, like a long-distance walker who understands that what matters is not how fast the journey begins, but whether there is enough strength left when the road stretches farther than expected. There are moments when quiet strength is overlooked. Bright light draws attention. Loud movement demands notice. Things that happen quickly and clearly are easy to praise. Taurus rarely belongs to that category. They work when no one is watching. They keep promises when no one reminds them. They stay when there are fewer people left around. These actions do not create instant highlights, but they accumulate something else: trust. I have seen Taurus in moments when everything seemed exhausted, when others began to give up, when early enthusiasm had faded, when there was no longer praise or outside motivation. Taurus was still there, not because they do not feel tired, but because they have learned how to walk alongside fatigue. They adjust their breathing. They slow their pace, but they do not stop completely. Their flame does not need wind to burn brighter. It does not go out when the wind changes direction. This kind of strength is rarely recognized at the right moment. It does not impress at first glance. It does not bring excitement. Yet when everything else runs out of energy, it becomes visible, like a late-night lamp still glowing in a house where all other lights are off. Not because it wants to stand out, but because someone is still awake, still staying with what they are doing. Taurus does not always recognize the value of this strength right away. They look around, see others moving faster, changing direction with ease, and wonder if they are moving too slowly. Time has its own way of answering questions like that. When short roads end early, the longer road remains open. When flames flare up and burn out, the steady flame continues to offer warmth. There is something deeply human in the way Taurus approaches life. Not to win, not to outshine, simply to continue in a way that does not cost them who they are. They do not burn through their energy for brief moments. They distribute it for a longer journey. This often leads to being underestimated, yet it is also what prevents collapse when pressure lasts longer than expected. Quiet strength also appears in how Taurus endures periods without recognition. No applause. No clear signs that progress is being made. Just continuing to do what needs to be done, holding what needs to be held, releasing what no longer fits little by little. Patience in this sense is not passive waiting. It is an active decision to remain with the process, and then there comes a very quiet moment when someone suddenly realizes that the flame is still burning. Not brighter, not weaker, just still there after everything else has passed. Taurus carries this strength as a natural part of who they are, without naming it. It is enough to keep going, enough to remain, and enough that, when looking back, others understand that some forms of strength only truly appear after everything has finally grown quiet. And it is often in moments like these that Taurus begins to look back at themselves differently. Not with pride, not with doubt, just a brief, quiet sense of surprise. Like stepping out of a silent room and suddenly noticing the worn marks on the hallway floor. Footprints that have been there for a long time, unnoticed until the light hits them just right. There are periods when Taurus moves through life feeling slightly out of step with the world around them. Questions arise naturally, not loudly, but persistently. Am I moving in the right direction? Did I miss something important? How far have others already gone? These questions do not stop them, but they add a little weight to each step. And while carrying that weight, they often forget that the ability to carry it at all is already a form of strength. Taurus rarely sees their inner strength in the present moment. They tend to recognize it only after a chapter has closed. After a relationship makes it through days that were hard to speak about. After a road longer than expected still stretches forward. After a small habit turns out to be the most reliable shelter of all. That strength does not arrive as a clear declaration. It reveals itself in a simpler way. They are still standing, even if they cannot remember when they first began to stand. I once watched a Taurus during a stretch when almost nothing changed on the surface. The same job, the same rhythm, the same familiar returns at the end of the day. From the outside, there were no signs of progress. Then, during a very ordinary conversation, the way they spoke about themselves was different. Not more confident, but lighter, less guarded, as if something inside had been rearranged, even though everything outside remained quiet. It is these silent shifts that often cause Taurus to underestimate themselves. They compare their progress to the visible movement of others and feel as though they are falling behind. But inner strength is not measured by speed. It is measured by the ability to remain with a process long enough for it to change you from the inside. And while that is happening, it is very difficult to see. There are days when Taurus wonders whether their persistence is worth it, whether not changing direction quickly might be a mistake. Time answers those questions in a very quiet way. What is built slowly rarely collapses all at once. What is held together with patience tends to stand more firmly when pressure lasts longer than expected. Not because it is perfect, but because it has learned how to carry weight. Taurus often realizes how strong they are only when looking back at things they once believed were too much to handle. Days that felt impossible eventually passed. Empty spaces that seemed unfillable found their own shape. Not every question finds an answer, but the initial sense of panic gradually gives way to acceptance. And within that acceptance, inner strength becomes clearer than any affirmation ever could. There is something deeply human about forgetting your own strength. Taurus does not stand in front of a mirror reminding themselves that they are strong. They live, they endure, they hold on, and they continue. Only when they pause for a moment do they notice that the distance traveled is longer than they thought. Not to praise themselves, but to understand that they did not break. And if there are times when they forget that, it is still all right. Inner strength does not disappear simply because it is not remembered. It remains there, like solid ground beneath the feet, even when the eyes are not looking down. When needed, it shows itself. Naturally. At the right moment. Not to prove anything, but to remind us that some forms of strength do not need a name, and are still enough to keep moving forward, in their own rhythm. And as that rhythm slows, you begin to hear more clearly the things that were once buried beneath the noise. Not a complete answer. Not a truth that needs to be held onto. Just the feeling of living at a pace the body and the mind can actually sustain. Taurus often pauses at that point, not to prove anything, but simply to sense what still remains after everything else has fallen back. It might be a familiar road opening up each morning. It might be a quiet room where the light enters just enough. Or it might be the gentle relief of no longer needing to chase anyone at all. These things are not large, they do not draw attention, yet they carry a very real weight. The weight of having stayed with yourself long enough to no longer panic in silence. And if, while listening, you suddenly recognize something familiar, a slower breath, an unhurried step, or a pause that needs no clear reason, then perhaps this story has touched something personal. No need to name it, no need to explain it. Just a brief moment of recognition, quiet and shared, enough to make someone want to stay still a little longer. The story settles here, like a lamp turned low, not fully switched off. Leaving behind just enough quiet for each person to carry their own rhythm and continue walking in a way that does not have to resemble anyone else at all.